Tiger's head.
Like cameras.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Good evening. I'd like to start the April 30th City Council workshop. Mr. Bennett is absent today and excused. We're going to start with a discussion regarding municipal relationship to the Caribou Hospital District. Manager.
Mayor and Council, there's a big binder of information that you may or may not have picked up. Inside of this packet includes a lot of the laws and that pertain to the creation of the Caribou Medical Center and the Caribou Hospital District, and how all of this came to be. And so some questions were asked about what is the relationship between the city and the hospital, and we wanted to get this put together. And so I understood it as a new manager and have a very clear understanding of what's going on there. But I've put together a PowerPoint which summarizes most of this 2-inch worth of information. And so let me run through that, and if there's any questions near the end, that's probably going to be the easiest way to go on this. So in 1912, Dr. Jefferson Carey passed away, and in his will, he asked for 2 gifts to the city of Caribou. One would be sufficient to provide continual maintenance of his grave, and we still have those funds in our reserve accounts to continue to maintain his grave. And the second would be for the creation or the founding and endowing of a secular and non-sectarian general hospital. And the city had 7 years from his death to accept the foundation or the endowment for the hospital. There was a process we had to go through in order to accept those funds. And so in 1913, a state law was passed, a public and special law, which is in your binder, that authorized the town to accept a certain legacy. And in 1915, the state law was amended again to state that if the city accepts the legacy, that there had to be a board of managers created, or in this case, the board of managers of the Jefferson Carey Hospital Fund. And the new board was to have 3 trustees who were to be elected by the citizens after the initial year, and trustees would have a 3-year offsetting terms. And so basically that fund was created it would be managed by 3 people elected by the citizens, and they would make sure that that fund was there to help take care of the hospital. And every year, even today, there's still 1 person elected by the citizens to be on that board and to manage those funds. Okay. At this point, it's basically an investment fund that gets managed. Okay. In 1916, the town voted to accept the legacy. So this is 4 years after Dr. Carey passed away, and there was the first managers of that fund were established by the city at the time, John Roberts, O.H. Smith, and H.D. Collins. In 1921, the city itself was authorized to begin raising money for the benefit of the Carey Hospital. And that same year, the state decided that they were going to help out in the building of a hospital. And so the state said that they would contribute $10,000 toward the hospital. Actually, they would contribute it to the Carey managers, and the city would have to raise $40,000 to also help in the building of the hospital. And so in 1922, all of the funding that they needed was pulled together, They had the 20,000 from the town, a little over 24,000 was contributed by individuals. The state contributed their 10,000, and the Cary managers of that Cary fund, they contributed almost 24,000 toward the hospital. And in 1923, the city voted to begin building the hospital. Okay. And as we start to get into this, it's important to start to compartmentalize. You have the city, and now you have this group that manages the fund, and now you have the hospital. You have three kind of distinct entities that are being created, and then later on we'll see a fourth that gets created. So in 1924, the town voted to elect a body of citizens to manage the Cary Memorial Hospital. So again, this is separate from the city and separate from the fund. We're now talking about just to manage the hospital. The city voted to elect a board of directors that would just manage the hospital. Okay. The building was completed in 1924 and turned over to the directors of the hospital. And the directors are appointed by the city council. Okay. That was memorialized more in 1939 when, again, by state law, the city adopted a town manager form of government. And this law, this 1939, is also in your packet. All of these laws are in your packet. And so it established that there would be a 7-member body with 2 ex officio members, one being the town manager and one being the chairman of the Jefferson Cary Hospital Fund. So that very first initial fund group, those 3, the chairman of that group gets to be on the hospital board of directors, just by matter of their position. Okay. It was also made very clear that the town manager is not responsible for buildings, purchasing of materials and supplies coming under the school department, the Cary Hospital, Public Library, and the Jefferson Cary Hospital Fund. So the town manager does these things and the hospital does its own thing over here. Okay. Yeah.
Public library, was that changed at some point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. In 45, you see a little bit more empowerment to the fund group, that initial hospital fund. In 1945, they were empowered to accept and receive in behalf of the town of Caribou any gift or legacy by any person or persons or body corporate to the Cary Memorial Hospital or to the town of Caribou for the benefit of said hospital. So if somebody came to town and they came in the doors into a city council meeting and said, hey, I want to donate $500,000 to the hospital, they actually wouldn't have to come to you as a city council to do that. They could just go to the Cary Hospital Memorial Fund and they could accept that. Okay.
So this looks like, thank you for getting us started, but we're going to be on our own here. These new laws all the time, is that?
It kind of, yeah, it starts to kind of evolve that way. Yeah. Okay. In 1953, this is when we have this 4th body that gets created, the Cary Hospital District, which is a body, politic, and corporate. It's basically a completely separate political entity, almost as you would consider Presque Isle is from Caribou City. It's completely separate. They are their own thing. Okay. The difference, though, with the district is that the governing board of trustees are appointed by the city council. So that's the leverage, in a sense, that the city would have over the board or the hospital district, is the council appoints the trustees, but beyond that, they are their own entity. Okay. And so they can acquire property for the hospital and related medical and surgical purposes. They were tasked with erecting, enlarging, repairing, equipping, and maintaining a hospital building or buildings related to the hospital, medical and surgical equipment, completing, grading, furnishing, rebuilding, adding onto, renovating, and otherwise bettering the conditions of any and all buildings within the said town used for hospital purposes, leasing or letting any property of said district to said town, receiving, accepting, and holding gifts, grants, or devices of property, real, personal, or mixed, to be used for hospital-related hospital, medical, and surgical equipment. Yeah.
Yeah, I get back to Mark's diagram that he was trying to figure out what was what. This one says it's elected though. Elected Board of Trustees.
The language says elected in one point. It says elected as provided hereafter in the law, and the provided hereafter stipulates that the city council appoints them. So even though the word elected is there, it specifies how that election takes place, and that is by appointment of the city council.
So were all these responsibilities shifted from the board to now this hospital district?
Basically.
Do we know why?
The district was created initially for the purpose of, in a sense, making it so that the city did not have to incur a lot of extra debt to build a new hospital. And so the district was created so that they could go out, acquire land, build a building, and get the facilities, and the city would not be encumbered with that same financial obligation. In fact, maybe one thing to point to, I don't have this in the PowerPoint, but in your packet, under tab H, this 1953 law, if you flip through to page 503 of that, there's section 4. It says how financed. And about halfway down, there's a sentence. Basically, it says that they can go and they can get bonds, and so they can incur their own debt. And it says that said bonds and notes shall be legal obligations of said district. So it's not legal obligations with the backing of the city. They are the legal obligations of the district themselves. In fact, it's also, we'll get into this, I think, on this next slide, that the district itself cannot be dissolved as long as it has debt. So in that sense, the city would never incur any of its debt because it can't be dissolved as long as it has debt. But in the 53, the law was interesting the way it was worded. I've highlighted it there in the yellow, that when the district is free and clear of all indebtedness, all property and assets are to be turned over to the city for continued operation and hospital benefit. It was an automatic trigger under the 1953 law that as soon as they were out of debt, the hospital and every aspect of it became the city's responsibility. Now, that law changed later on so that the city council could vote to accept the hospital or not, or to let it stay on its own. But at least in the 1953 law, it was an automatic trigger. Okay. The 1953 law again made it, just kind of spelled out that you have the hospital district, which you have 3 persons, and the law was kind of interesting when they started spelling out. The district is responsible for basically everything pertaining to the hospital except what the board of directors takes care of. And the board of directors were specifically tasked with the hiring of the personnel, fixing of the salaries, kind of the day-to-day operations. And anything else the district took care of. Okay. Any questions on that so far? Okay. In 54, so up until this time, the hospital was owned by the city. I should say the buildings that the hospital was in were owned by the city. The city deeded those to the district. Okay? And in 1955, the hospital district, their debt ceiling was raised from $300,000 to $315,000. And then you have the next year, 1957, the state authorized the hospital district to convey portions of property to other people. So it was given more authority to do more things with the assets that were turned over to it. In 1967, the city established the city manager form of government, and the district's debt ceiling was raised from $315,000 to $1.5 million. So they have more borrowing capacity now. And in 1973, it was raised from $1.5 million to $8 million. And it was again reiterated that the district trustees are to be appointed by the city council. You then have, yes, in 73, this is where the law was changed ever so slightly to say that the district may be dissolved by a legally constituted vote of the Caribou City Council. So it's no longer an automatic trigger. When they're out of debt, they become the city's responsibility. The city council has to actually vote to dissolve them. But they can't be dissolved as long as they have debt. Okay? In 75, the district was authorized to assess taxes. So again, they've been given this $8 million potential bonding capacity, and if they need to generate revenues to pay off those bonds or those debts, under the 1975 law, they can now assess taxes, just like the school district does today. Okay? They would go through, have a budget meeting, and say, we need to raise taxes, and they send a note to the city and says, please add this to your mill rate. They haven't done that, but they have that power. Okay. In 75, the hospital district purchased the current hospital property on Van Buren Road. So that's kind of the impetus for buying the property and starting the new hospital, was having that, the bonding capacity where it was, and having this authority now to levy taxes. In 78, they entered into a lease agreement with the city. And here again, when we talk about the hospital is its organization, right? The doctors, the patients, the administrators, that's the hospital. And the district now has built the brick and mortar buildings, they've bought the land. And in 1978, they leased all of those facilities to the city so that the hospital could now occupy that property. And the rent, the agreement specifies that the rent is as required to pay the debt obligations of the district. Right now, we're not paying anything on an annual basis to the district. They're, in a sense, covering all of their costs related to those facilities. So the city's hospital is able to occupy those buildings for free. Okay. Just another way of thinking of it, you have the hospital, the Cary Medical Center, and you have the district facilities, their buildings and land. Our hospital, the city's hospital, is inside their facilities now. Okay. In 93, this was a big step for both the district and the city. There were discussions taking place about combining the Cary Medical Center and TAMIC, and ways of doing that. Because the hospital is a city hospital, And we accepted the obligation to have a city hospital clear back in 1916 when we accepted the gift. We also needed to be authorized to divest ourselves of that obligation. And so the 1993 law authorized the city and the hospital district, if a separate entity was somehow created, a nonprofit entity that was willing to take on all of those obligations, the city council could basically divest itself of the hospital obligation into this other nonprofit entity if it was so voted. And the Cary Medical Center and the board, they could do the same thing. They could say, we're going to turn over all obligations related to this hospital to this separate nonprofit entity that gets created in order to combine the two hospitals together. Okay, so we, as a city, we now have that ability to let go of the obligation of having it. Okay. There are conditions in order to do that, though. Any indebtedness is clear, or a repayment of such is provided for. So if the city or if the hospital district still has debt, they can't just say we're no longer going to have to pay that. It either has to be paid off, or the new nonprofit entity has to have a way of continuing the payments to make sure everything's taken care of. But then the city council has to vote to terminate the lease with the district. And you also have to approve the transfer of assets and liabilities from the city to the new entity, whatever it is. Okay. Any questions on that part of it? Okay, that gets us really to today. And this was an updated chart that I sent. Oh, let me go back. So you can see in this, the top line, the red, that's the evolution of the city from 1912, going from basically its own, the city, to a town charter, to a city charter. And you have the creation of the hospital district, or the hospital board of directors after the hospital was built. You have the influx of money from the city as well as from the Jefferson Hospital fund managers to build or buy land, build buildings, and those eventually getting turned over to the hospital district. And you still have the hospital board of directors that is in place. Again, they manage the hospital, but you have now the hospital district that takes care of land, buildings, improvements, and so on. It's interesting that in the city charter it talks about that the hospital is required to submit capital improvement plans to the city council for inclusion in our budget. But with the creation of the hospital district, the district now does all of its capital improvements, and being a separate government entity, it has its own capital improvement budget and handling of those things. And so we don't get capital improvement requests from the hospital anymore. That's all handled on the district side.
Is there still an agreement with TANIC somewhere, or was that dissolved anywhere?
It fell through.
Okay, so that, I knew it fell through, but I wondered if there was still some wording or some, because I thought I saw something on another page, but maybe I'm thinking of something else, that there was still some wording there that had to do with TANIC. So they are not involved?
Not at this point.
Okay.
That legislation went through, the way I understood it, with the understanding that the communities were going to start working together to combine,
Yeah.
and then everyone decided against it.
It became a turf war, basically. You know, who's really going to have control of this, and who's, you know, so it fell apart because of turf war. But they certainly could re-engage each other and look at that again if there's a way of.
Well, I just thought I saw somewhere after '93 that their name was still involved, but maybe not. I might be thinking of something else, so.
Not that I know of.
It was just automatic that if it didn't happen, then it didn't happen, and they had nothing to. Okay.
Right. Okay. So anyways, this just kind of illustrates the timeline and the creation of the 4 different entities. The next slide that I've got here, just another way of looking at it. You've got Caribou City and its jurisdiction on one side of the Gulf, the Caribou Hospital District on its side. The trustees are appointed by the Caribou City Council, but they are their own, they manage the hospital district. And the hospital, the directors in the hospital, they function within the hospital district buildings and land, but they are all appointed by the city council as well. Okay.
Question mark between right there.
Yep. I put the question mark there because there's still question in my mind that those assets were initially accepted by the city. Even though they're managed by the separate trustees group, I'm not sure why we're not still showing those assets as being part of the city, because they are still technically the city's responsibility and our...
And there's a lease.
Right. Right. So that's, I'm still trying to figure out why. I know that they're audited separately and they have their own thing. I just don't know why we're not, why our budget and our financials aren't also reflecting that as being our gift clear back from 1916. So I'm still looking at that one.
So you would say, as far as this slide goes, that's the only thing we're not really certain of.
Right. Right. The last slide I've got, I know there was a question as far as flow charting management of the different things and the just the organizational aspect. So you have the citizens of the city, and they elect the 7 city councilors, and you appoint a city manager, and you also appoint the board of directors for the hospital. The board of directors, they're responsible for the hospital administration, the hospital staff, and any outside contracts that they might seek to have. For instance, Quorum, it's a national corporation that they utilize to buy medical supplies and things, and other hospitals are also working with them so they can get better bulk pricing. But that is a contract between Quorum and the hospital, and we don't get involved in those discussions. Okay. You have the citizens that elect the Jefferson Carey Fund trustees, and their sole responsibility is to manage the funds and provide them to the hospital as necessary. Then you have the hospital district, and the reason why these lines are dashed is because they are their own separate government entity. They are in some way directly responsible to the citizens, but because the city council appoints them, they're also indirectly responsible to the city council. So there's no solid line there between the city and the district, or from the citizens of the district. If they were directly responsible to the citizens would be electing them. But that's not what happens. And so that's why those lines are dashed there.
And they're essentially also responsible to them because they can tax them.
Right. Right. There was a question of there is a separate Jefferson Carey Foundation, which is a separate 501c3 that has been created. It was created, in a sense, out of the hospital. That it goes out and it's a fundraising entity basically, and its sole purpose is for the benefit of the hospital and the citizens of the city, and so.
But separate from the Carey Fund, the Jefferson Carey Fund.
It's separate from the Carey Fund.
Oh.
And as long as they comply with all the IRS laws, their sole purpose is to fundraise and generate funds for capital projects.
And are they managed by the hospital administration?
I don't believe so. I think they are, as a 501c3, they have to have their own board of directors and their own bylaws. And now I don't know necessarily if it's a matter of the administration just taking one hat off and putting the other one on as they do that, but they are a legally separate private entity. And then you have the VA, which is up there, and again, they are their own separate government group.
If there was room, where would you have put Pines on this board?
They would be a separate group as well, like the Jefferson Carey Foundation. and the
Green and
VA.
yellow?
Yep. And that gets a little messy now that the CEO of the hospital is also the acting CEO of Pines, so they have a shared administration right now, but they are their own separate medical service providing entity.
I think it would be helpful if they were on there. Only because, you know, you would have like a dash line between hospital administration and Pines on there,
Yeah,
right?
right. Yep. Okay. So I know that some of the questions that have been coming to me are if the hospital is still a city hospital, should they be functioning as a public body would, having advertised meetings and open to the public and so on? And the short answer from my point of view is that yes, they should be advertising appropriately according to state law. They should be open to the public. And in talking with Galen and Chris, they would tell you, yes, anybody from the public's welcome to come into our meetings and listen to what's going on if they want to. And so it's just a matter of, are they advertising it properly and doing what they need to that way. But where the district is its own separate thing, yes, they should be handling themselves in the same manner, but it's almost like we can't, as a city, go to Presque Isle and say, hey, you guys should be doing this. They need to be accountable to their citizens and their constituents directly to do that. So, but yes, they should be operating as an open and public entity.
Are they going to?
That's, I guess, for them and to figure out how they're going to do that.
Okay, my question becomes, are we the policing agency for this? Or is this just a state that says these people are conducting meetings that should be public and they're not I mean, who goes and fixes that?
It really would fall to the citizens at that point. I mean, you as a city council, you don't have jurisdiction over the district,
Okay.
other than as an appointing board. It would fall on the citizens, the concerned citizens, or the state could step in and say, from the state attorney general's office, hey, we're going to slap your hand because you're not following protocols. They could do that if they chose to.
Years past, we used to vote for candidates to go on the hospital district board.
Uh-huh.
And I throw my hand up not knowing what I was approving.
You did it again this year?
I did it again this year.
Well, we all did.
You know,
Right.
so to go to Mr. Martin's question is, I guess, we are, and your answer is we are in charge of running it through the people we ask to be on these boards.
Right.
And if I didn't ask the proper questions of those candidates, but I don't even know if they've even come in front of us, now that I think about it. So I guess that whole process should be looked at a little bit.
But, I mean, I can't, I mean, this, just because we appointed them, right, we appoint your place.
That's right.
So, does that give me, as a counselor, or this council as a group, to go to your meetings and say you should be doing this, this, and that? I don't think so.
No,
So is it can we haul the directors in and say, can we say you should be doing this, this, or that? Can we do that? I mean, I think we're asking questions that we can't enforce it unless we change the directors, right?
Well, and didn't the last council vote to remove a tri-community? Remember?
Yes.
So, I mean,
Yeah,
I mean, is that something that, so that's something that we could do?
right.
We're allowed to do that?
But it was the only way because they're independent and they didn't have to listen to us. So I'm assuming that these people are the same.
Right.
But I mean, personally, I don't have any problem with the hospital. I mean, it's good to learn and this, but I mean, we got enough things to do. Except trying to run a hospital.
And they do have informative meetings that we're invited to attend. They go over information and people that are appointed are there as well. So it's not like we're not getting any information. We're invited to those meetings.
And I was thinking about that as well. As an ex officio member of the hospital board of directors, I get a packet of information every month. And some of that information is not sensitive, that I could certainly also be including that in your monthly packets as well. So you'd have even more information about what's going on at the hospital. And that's, that doesn't require a lot of extra work on my part to make sure that you have that in your hands. So I can start doing that. Okay.
I started this quest of trying to understand this relationship, and I've gone to 3 meetings and I've been nothing but granted the utmost prompt answer to my questions that I have given both the Cary Hospital District and throw in some administration people. They've been very forthcoming and everything's been, but it is a complicated system
Right.
to understand, and I'm going to continue to meet with them because I feel more comfortable, because I don't want people to misinterpret my questions.
Yeah.
My questions can sometimes, because of my lack of terminology and understanding, can't be asked, not as diplomatically as they could be asked. And so I'm getting along good with them. They're doing it. The only thing that perked my ears when this whole thing started was when I found out somebody had a right to send the Caribou taxpayers a bill. And it just, my ears just picked up. I never knew such a thing existed. I mean, I knew about the county and I knew about the school. And here comes this ability to send, even though everything's run, it just perked my curiosity that I should know then how the system works.
Mhm.
So it's
And
very helpful.
We did talk, before you got on council, we did talk about that at one of the board meetings at Cary Medical. And Chris said that they've never used that power, whatever you want to say, they've never used it, but it has been there for a long time.
Could that be changed?
You'd have to go back and amend the law,
Yeah.
but yes, it could be changed.
I think that would be, we don't bother them, they don't bother us. No, I mean, yeah, I don't like to have that hanging over us.
Well, we can
See,
tax them as well.
Pardon?
I guess we can tax them as well. Because actually, that was what the,
I don't think so.
that was what the discussion was at the meeting that the former Mayor Aiken brought up. And he said, well, how about we tax you then? You should be paying taxes on these buildings. And he actually did bring that up. And she said, well, we could, I didn't think so either. but-
No, because they are a government
Yeah.
entity, and government is tax exempt.
And I said, maybe we should tax the hospitals, so.
Okay, let's say this happened. say they want to send us a bill. We could recall all the directors and appoint a new group.
I suppose you could.
That's our answer.
Oh, yeah, okay, I just wanna make sure, I'm not suggesting they're gonna send a text bill out to anybody.
No.
I'm not suggesting we recall anybody, and I just wanted to understand the operation of it. And-
Right.
But you said some things tonight that all of a sudden I thought we were subject to their debt, but maybe we're not as subject to it as much as I thought.
Oh,
And that's why I say I just have to keep asking diplomatic questions
yeah.
to, well, we have a meeting coming up in a couple months, like you said, Nicole, that we meet every quarter, and they'll accept my questions then, you know?
So they, as far as their debt is concerned, the auditors gave a report at the last Board of Directors meeting for the hospital. And in that report, the auditors indicated if the hospital doesn't increase or incur any additional debt, they could be out of debt in 2 years. But the hospital right now is in the works of adding additional space to the building and maybe expanding the VA part of the hospital, which is going to add more debt. And so it's going to be in debt for a long time.
Yeah, and it all started with a gift.
Yeah.
Hey, it's the biggest employer in town.
And I'm grateful we have them.
Yes.
I'm grateful we have them, I really am. And they're fine people. They really are.
Okay. So I know that Councilor Kirkpatrick has some more questions that in many ways I think they need to be specifically addressed to the hospital district and their trustees. And if you're okay as a council, I'm going to just set this aside on the shelf and start working on other things. And if any other questions need to come up specific to them or to those groups, I can address things with the hospital board of directors because I'm on that board. But if there's something with the district, then that's maybe something that you need to take up individually with them, unless you want to take formal action as a council to direct me to do otherwise.
Which brings up, I mean, this is a lot of work. And I would request from the council that if you have a project or a task or something you'd like the manager to work on, if it's gonna take more than a couple hours, it should be brought to the council. And then the council will decide if the manager wants to spend his time with it. I mean, this is all great stuff and it's good to know this and I learned like you learned. But how many hours did you put in that?
Several days.
And you have a city to run. So anyway, just because if we all had our own pet projects, we'd have to hire another manager to run the city. So I would ask that if we have projects, and they're all worthwhile, but so that the manager's not working on 5 or 6 of them at a time, that we decide amongst the whole council, you know, what we'd like the manager to be working on.
And that being said, any of the remaining questions that I have that aren't answered, if I understood you correctly, can the hospital district can get the answers to you so you don't have to, is that the way I understand it?
Right.
Okay.
And so you know, I've already taken a crack at based on everything that we've pulled together, from the city standpoint, I've tried to address them. There are some things that the district's just gonna have to address on their own.
Sure. Okay.
Okay?
Anything else on this?
And I should give kudos where they're due. Jane reached out to her contacts at the state and was able to get the list of a lot of the laws. And definitely Denise, my assistant, she put all the packets together
It's
after we
good to
compiled
have.
them. And-
Because somebody's gonna come in 5 years and say, what's that?
Well, and Jane went through the old archives and
Nobody needs
found,
information.
she found was it 1946, 1945, the city manager at the time had done what he could to compile what he knew up to that point. And that's also in the packet here, but Jane dug through and got her jeans dirty to find that for us, so.
It's in the dirty deeds. That's what Kaylin calls them, is the dirty deeds.
Just wanted to thank Jane and Denise for their extra help in putting this together for you. Okay,
Okay, next item on the agenda, personnel compensation policy.
so what I've provided to you, I sent it out electronically, but I've also given you a hard copy in front of you. The red text that's stricken through or underlined were the changes based on the city council's last discussion on this, and the blue text are points of clarification or changes that were added after I went over it with the department heads. And so we just wanted to bring this to you again for discussion, and if there's anything else that you have questions about or want to discuss or have some clarification on, I'm happy to do that. It's your meeting, Mayor. You can ask a question whenever you want.
I can have, like, okay. It's, the personnel committee is referenced in here, and the city council is referenced in here. The personnel committee is us, correct? Is that the personnel committee that you're talking about
Yes,
in here? Like to approve stipends or to do, okay,
yes. Unless the council chooses to change up the makeup of that board.
right. Well, it
It
could
is-
be three, it could be all of us, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And my other question is, we're going to go 5 steps. We're going to take the average of these communities for each job. We're going to put that average as step 3, or step 4, step after year 3. Okay, so right there, the average goes there. First year people get 6% less than that, then they get 2%, 2%. All right, and then beyond that, you had another 2% twice,
The longevity.
yeah?
Uh-huh.
Okay, now, you talked about longevity in a chart like that, and then you talked about longevity after 5, 10, and 15 years. Well, I don't have a problem with the longevity at 10 or 15, but haven't we already taken care of the longevity at 5?
The longevity would kick in at, if they were working, they'd have their first 4 years to get to average. And then the way it's written, the longevity would kick in at 6. At 6,
I
8.
must have been reading,
at 6, 8, and 10. So at year 10, you would be 6% above average.
at year 10,
At year 10, you'd be 6% above average.
okay. And then you want to do it again at 15?
Nope.
So how come there's so many different copies of this?
It
I
keeps
saw
changing.
one where you had the chart, you know, you had the -6, -4, -2, average, +2, +4, which I don't see there now.
Is that Dave's? Was this Dave?
That
was
was
this yours?
that was Dave's initial draft back in December.
The one that said level 3 average, level 4 average plus 2%, level 5 average plus, is that, this is yours, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay, so if you're brand new, you're at -6, -4, -2, average.
Right.
+2, so let's say that's 5 years. Is it going to be +2 or +2 then the longevity?
No, it's at
What?
5 years you're still at average, but at 6th year you'd have your first longevity.
6 years, okay, that's +2. Then 10,
At 6, 8, and 10.
oh,
So
6, 8,
every-
and 10.
yeah,
That's how,
every year.
that's what you changed.
Right. The first draft I sent out, it had it at 5, 10, 15. The concern was, at least from the department heads, was you're saying then that somebody has to wait 15 years to be considered that they've got their job and they're proficient at it and they can be a contributor amongst their peers. And you also want to keep them there longer. The thought was at 10
But then they
years.
stay for 30 years and they're going to go 22 years without a longevity.
Potentially.
So I can see that a couple of years from now, they say, can we add another longevity step? And I know that because I negotiated for the teachers and that's what we did.
They,
But
Theoretically,
but
yeah.
But it's wrong to drag it out. If you make a decent wage, you have to have been here 35 years. And that's what is set up in a lot of places, so.
Theoretically, if an employee is with you and you haven't created an upward mobility position for them after 10 years, then they're either in the position of they don't want anything different and they're fine where they're at, or they are looking somewhere else and they're going to go somewhere else. But if you have an upward mobility position, we use the term, you're going from broom pusher to janitorial, supervisor to public works director. I'm not saying Dave went from that to that.
That's how
But,
he did it.
yeah, but in your organization, you should be able to move people up. And so if somebody gets to 10 years and they've got their longevity and they're not willing to move up into management or supervise responsibilities, they just want to continue doing what they're doing, then they'll just continue getting paid what they're paid. But if it comes a time when they're willing to be now a supervisor, then that step up, that becomes their next pay increase. And so you're, in a sense, trying to get people to think long-term career by moving up and being,
What about the people that are up at the top and have nowhere else to go?
then they have that same choice to make. Am I willing to continue to be here after my longevity and continue to get paid what I'm paid working with who I'm working with?
Right.
Or do I start looking elsewhere? And then also, I guess we need to keep in mind that wages is only one element of a complete benefit package. There's things like your years of service awards that could be handed out, or an occasional bonus for managing a road failure project kind of thing. Not saying there's going to be one, but there's little things along the way that could also be provided to say we do appreciate you, and it doesn't all have to come in the wage category.
But mathematically, you get your money up front. I mean, if you have to wait 20 years to get to that step, instead of waiting 5 years, then you've lost 15 years of that money. So you want to get up there, and once you're up there, it's a decent pay once they're up there, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're gonna start them out at a decent pay to begin with, and you wanna give them a COLA. So I don't think we need a longevity on top of that, because they get increases in vacation, right, as they go along.
Right.
They have the opportunity to move ahead if they want to. And when you get 2% of a particular salary, you get it that year, then the next year your salary's increased, so you're gonna get 2% of that increase anyway, so you're still gonna be going up. I don't think that we need the longevity. I think we should give them a COLA every year. They know they'll get something every year, but I'm not in favor of the longevity.
But the way this is designed, they'd only want a COLA every other year, because on the off year, they're going back and those towns are gonna change and stuff, and that's what they're going to use every other year to set
Every
this
other
out.
year.
And then a COLA the next year. I don't see a problem with, I mean, we're talking 4 steps, 3-4 steps, I mean. I know in a lot of school systems, they have 15 or 16 of these. I mean, look at the government pay scale. I mean, I don't have a problem with longevity, but again, I'm one. What I do have a problem with is this weight factor, city valuation. Did
Yeah.
you notice that which of these towns have the lowest valuation?
Right. And I guess I shared that with you not to say to incorporate that directly into the document, but just as a way of looking at, to say we're just going to do a 6,000 to 10,000 population, that's our only way of looking at it. There could be a way of saying, yeah, we're going to take 6,000 to 10,000, but maybe we don't want to include cities from this area in that category, but maybe we also want to include Orono that has more than 10,000 people because it's just barely over 10,000 people. Its valuation is similar to ours, and it's not that far away. You know, there's
Why don't we just look at the valuations instead of the population? Why not look at, if you look on that chart, you notice that Caribou's got the lowest population.
Low valuation.
Valuation, I'm sorry, not population, valuation.
Right.
And so if you take a look at those, all, other than a couple, three, they're all way over. And when you've got a much higher valuation in property, you've got a better tax rate to begin with. So I think we should be looking at towns with the evaluations right around ours.
Like a plus minus 5% or 10%.
Yeah,
And then have the same, put it in the same tool, and then you can play with the percentages that way. Because your valuation is the way you raise
your tax dollar. And when you start looking at these, and I started looking at those, and I'm going, oh my gosh, look at the difference in the, and even the ones that are down there in population, their population soars in the summertime. And, so we should be going with the evaluations.
And they have the infrastructure to support that,
That's
which is in the
exactly right.
valuation. So I think if you went with a plus minus 5 or 10% valuation, you're gonna get, say, Holton, Lincoln, Newport, probably towns that are a little more closer to our
Yeah.
situation.
Or no,
so if you look at, let me redo that. So you're right, Caribou is the low one on the totem pole. 20% above Caribou is 448, almost 449,000. That means that you're only going to be comparing yourself to 3 other cities if you look at a 20%.
Right, what I'm saying is make your list not based on 6,000 to 10,000. Throw that criteria out. Make your criteria for your list of 20 communities is plus minus maybe 20%.
That is 20%.
Plus, but not minus.
There's not a
Nobody's
minus.
minus.
Right, but
What do you mean there's not a minus?
We're the low one out of the 6 to 10.
yeah, but what about
Right,
other
well,
places?
if
not
we
Fort
use 6 to
Fairfield or
10,000.
something?
what I'm saying is
Okay.
throw
Throw
that
the-
criteria out.
Right.
Make the criteria for creating a list. It's the
Valuation.
valuation. That way we get rid of all these communities that are 6 to 10,000 people that are over $1 billion, which,
We raise a lot of taxes on $1 billion.
Well,
That's way
you would also then, you'd get rid of Presque Isle as being a comparative city.
well, what's the percent difference between the two?
Presque Isle's 20%.
So Presque Isle's 553 million.
Right, and maybe in a case like that, you could throw them in and make it an exception because they are the neighboring one.
Well, what I'm getting at is whatever that percent difference is, go plus minus that difference. So you get,
So they're a,
it's 180 mil, yeah.
And that may include them all, which might come down at some point in time too, I don't know, but,
So-
valuation.
roughly 50%. So if you were to look at the communities that are 561 million, one, two, three, four, five, six, 7, 8. You'd have 8 communities.
Yeah, but you want the 8 before that too.
Right.
If we're going to do this.
Right. That's what I'm saying. You'll get like Holton and Newport and Lincoln and the ones that are below that, that are closer to
I mean,
similarity to this community.
let me see if I can grab those communities and pull them in. So 50%,
So I take the average of this.
Mm.
What they say they're gonna take afterwards.
So you're looking at 187 million?
Yeah.
So the community that is at 187 million, the first one will be Clinton in Kennebec.
Look what's included, like Old Town.
From,
Well,
let's
that's
see,
not a big
187 to 560.
Farmington. You know, so in other words, it eliminates Cumberland County and York County and Wiscasset.
So you still, your pool of potential cities that you're looking at is 129 cities, as far as potential cities to be for comparison.
In
But
the
as
state.
far as those that are responding to the survey, you're only going to get a small subset of those, but you'd have
So maybe say,
129.
go back to plus minus 5% and make the exception Presque Isle.
Well, that's an outlier if you're gonna do that. We don't know what the other towns are. Like you had 8 towns, 12 towns when you went above?
From 6 to 10.
Yeah, so let's go down
That's what I'm saying.
6 or 10 and then we'll have,
You have 129
there's 129.
cities between that high of 561 million, so that's 50% above and 50% below the city's valuation. You have 129 cities in the state
Oh
of
my
Maine.
God.
Right, so that's what I'm saying, just go plus minus 5 or 10%, and then throw Presque Isle in there, just because they're close. Whatever the percentage is, so you get a list of, say, 20 communities. And then you weight the valuation heavy, like say 90%, and population 5%, and distance 5%.
So
And see if it
this-
flushes out.
What I just brought up for you, this is the list, according to the Maine Municipal Association, of the cities that are contributing to the survey. Okay? So, for instance, as far as the manager or the administrator, okay, you have, out of all of these cities, and I mean, I'll just show you by population. As you go down through this, you can see that many of these cities aren't contributing any information to the survey.
Well, that'll reduce the 129.
Right.
It surely would. You know, you can see how sparse the information is as far as actually contributing to the.
So when you say contributing, so they don't have valuation in there.
They don't give you the information.
The cities haven't reported it to be included.
Can't you get that, like, from the MMA or something? Wouldn't
This
they?
is from MMA.
Oh, it is, okay. They're not required to, or
No.
the state? I
No.
mean, there must be somebody that has public record what the valuations. of
Well, yeah,
town-
it's public record, but they don't have to report it to MMA.
It's a voluntary survey.
We'd have to do a freedom of access
Right.
request for each.
Well, how many towns and cities do we want to compare? I would think 20 would be enough to give you an idea.
I mean, if you said that rather than looking at population or valuation, you just said, we want, every position needs to have 20 samplings to be looked at. And we find the 20 closest numbers for that position. And we just take the average for the 20 positions that we find, and that's the average. We could do that. I mean, give you an example. I looked, Wanda Raymond, our finance director, is leaving. For her position of cities between 6 to 10,000 population, there's only 16 cities that responded to the survey. But that's 6 to 10,000. If we went below that and we picked up another 4 cities, we'd be able to get our 20. And And I actually went through that process today, and it really didn't adjust her average down very much. But some positions, I mean, it could. What we're really trying to just do is come up with the tool. What is the tool that we're going to use? And is it simple enough to replicate every time we go through this process?
I would like to see, as we mentioned, put us in the middle and find 8 or 10 towns, above and below, based on valuation. Valuation means ability to pay, to me. And see where that takes us. And Prescott. And if Holton's not in there, add Holt. You know,
They should.
they should fall in
Yeah,
there.
they should fall in there.
If they don't participate with the MMA and municipal association, they will not be in the survey.
Right.
That could be a phone call away too. Right.
Well, I would think Holton.
Well,
I
maybe
don't
for
know that.
evaluations, but how are you gonna get 40, you're gonna call for 40 different positions on jobs and their salaries? I mean, that's a lot of work. I don't think so either. It's not just an evaluation, it's also all the positions, there's 40 different positions.
So Holton, they contributed for the city manager. We'd have to go through each line.
Criteria.
And because under administration, they might have 10 positions. Under planning, they've got 10 positions. And not every city categorizes those positions the same way or gives the same titles. Even Chief Susie pointed this out to me, that even the list of 6,000 to 10,000 population, I can pass that around, there's only 10 of the cities on the list that are like our department for comparison purposes. And so
But 10 should be enough.
Yeah.
I would think.
yeah, I mean, if we
I
said
mean,
we gotta
like
find the,
if you pick a range and there's only 2 or 3, well, then you're going to have to do the best you can.
find out.
But, if you've got 20, 25 towns and 10 or 12 fall, have something. But I mean, is there any difference? I mean, we want to, like Dave says, there's 40 jobs, positions, but there's no difference in using valuation or population in terms of the use of the tool. Is there?
Yes.
Because,
For instance, Bar Harbor has a population of only 5,500 people, but its valuation is significantly more.
Right.
So just because of where they're at, down in that county, close to the beach, the type of homes that are getting built there, their valuation is significantly different than the population that they have in there as permanent resident population.
no, I just mean finding the data.
Right.
Okay.
Getting your data set.
I mean, if we do this 100% population, finding the data for 20 towns, let's say, give or take, or we use 100% valuation, finding 20 towns. I don't see one being more work than the other.
No, as far as the workload to find the data,
Right, okay, that's what I was,
With the exception of the used population, all the data for all the jobs are already in the MMA survey. So it's just transferring the number into the tool. You don't have to call nowhere to find out what the public works director is. His wages is in there, the city
right,
manager's
we do the same thing with the other.
We'll use the information that
But
they give.
if you use towns that are not associated in the MMA survey, them are the towns that you're going to have to call for all the positions.
We're not gonna use those towns.
I see.
But hopefully.
We just wanna see what it
enough.
is. I mean, maybe it's not doable, I don't know.
but in the write-up, we could certainly say the intent is to use the tool, and we want to make sure we include Holton and Presque Isle, and whatever factor you want us to be looking at
To get your data set.
to get the data set. That
Yep.
they have to be included in whatever data set we utilize, and then we'll utilize this tool to find 10, 15 results and go from there.
I mean, whatever works. I mean, I'm not married to any particular method here, but it is a big factor, I think.
You could start at, I mean, you could say, we're going to look at a percentage off of Caribou for, as far as population evaluation, to try to find our initial results. We're going to include Prescott and Holton, and we're going to use this criteria to try to narrow it down. If we can't get our survey results, the number that we want, then we'll branch out to the next one, to the high, next one to the low, until we get the 10, 20 results that you want. It's all over the place. Just another example, using the same criteria, again, Wanda's position had 16 results. Looking at the same thing, the deputy treasurer, there was only 5 cities that responded to the survey. And so in order to get 10 results, we'd have to really expand that out. Or even the treasurer position, there was only 2 cities that responded to the survey, between 6,000 to 10,000 population. So I'm okay widening that as far as the population or evaluation, whatever it is. It's, I guess, a question of how many results do we want to see to say, yes, we're comfortable with that being the average.
I think 10 or 10
Yeah,
or 12.
I minimum.
Yeah.
Okay?
But we want to produce something that you just plug in 2%, or you just say, refresh, and these are the new averages. And we don't want to be inventing or playing with the tool. I mean, it should produce a...
Well, it gives you a base to start, come up from there, because if it's adjusted by MMA every couple of years anyway, then you just adjust it according to that criteria instead.
So this revision here is a revision of the section in the code, right, page 85, 86.
Right?
The page before it has evaluations. How does that fit in? How do evaluations fit in with longevity and these adjustments?
I've asked the same question. The concern with tying adjustments to evaluations is you're now getting into a merit-based system. And the concern of is that, do we have the tool in place to administratively handle that type of increase system in a totally non-biased way, and in a way such that it is uniformly fair based on every position that's out there? Or is it easier just to have a step-and grade system, which is what this has been drafted at, basically, is if you're there, you're doing your job, there's no reason to put you on probation or anything else. Then if you put the time in, you're getting your step-in grades, and that's how those increases are made. It's 2 different systems.
I'm only asking the question because I've never lived out of that world.
Yeah, I know, I'm the same way.
Okay.
But it's just another way of,
So the code says we're going to do evaluations. So because we're not in a merit system, we're not going to do them?
no, we are doing them.
Okay. It's just they're not going to factor into the section on
On wages and increase.
salaries.
Right. We need to be doing evaluations at least annually
Right.
on all of the employees so that we have documentation. I mean, hopefully we're documenting things more than just once a year, but we need to have at least some documentation on every employee's performance so that as issues come up, we have reports done.
Okay, now that we've got this all screwed up again,
Can I just make a side comment? Bob Dorsey was in the other day. He gave a talk on, and one of the points, talk on the crystal ball, what it's gonna look like in 10 or 15 years. One of the things he said would help us is if we got together, worked cooperatively with other communities. Wouldn't it be great if we had a tool that all the communities, the same tool all the communities were using? In Aroostook County, a little farther south, you know, we all knew what it, you know, and then there's different resources that would come together to know the easiest way to implement it. Do you ever have meetings with, is there such a thing as an Aroostook County Managers Association?
Uh-huh.
There is?
Yep.
You're
Well,
so smart when you leave
I'm
this
learning
meeting.
all the time here. Yeah,
And it-
okay,
well,
what do
it's-
you talk about?
Yeah, it's not only the managers, but it's open to any public officials. So you as council members could be part of that as well. But they meet on a monthly basis, the different locations around the county, and they talk about issues that the cities are facing, and they talk, you know, brainstorm how to deal with the issues and what's going on.
Well, would you mind asking on, at the next meeting, how they handle
Oh, yeah.
wage and classifications?
We
in
not only
their
have,
communities?
we not only have the Aroostook Municipal Association, we have a statewide city managers, cities and counties association, and we have an email listserv that we send out stuff to all the time, and I can send it out to them.
I, just because we're on Tri-Community Landfill and we hang, we're in meetings with other people from within our county, it just feels better.
Yeah,
Feels good,
right.
so to speak, and I'm just kind of curious. Okay, didn't mean to take up your time.
It's not like that. It's not that. I mean, ideally, the only way it's going to happen is if we do it like New Brunswick did. I don't know if they did it all over Canada, but I know New Brunswick, the central government mandated that you are now one town. It took 5 towns, you're one town, you 5 are a town, and they just did it. I mean, because like turf wars we talked about earlier, it's not gonna happen unless there's a lot of money incentive or
You're made to.
you're made to. It's just life, just the way people.
But maybe through I'm sorry,
Yeah.
maybe through
Oh, it
conversations.
doesn't hurt.
That,
Do most of the towns and cities use merit raises? Because I find, I'm worried that they can be subjective, they could maybe be biased, I don't.
You're not going to find municipal education, those kinds of places. It's not merit, not very much,
So they don't use merit?
not much.
Okay.
I mean, as a whole.
So typical, like you, I've only come through a merit system whenever I've worked. Of course, you know which part of the country I'm coming from, but it was typically the city council would put in the budget, if there was enough room in the budget, they would say, okay, this is how much we're allocating toward merit increases, and through the annual evaluation process, and the cities would have software that they could go through every position, and they would know every year, similar to what we adopted back in 2000, whenever it was, 15 criteria for every position that was maybe different for each position as well. And the supervisors would go through, okay, how are they on their work ethic? How are they on their loyalty? How are they on their skills, their training, and they'd go through, and you'd have a list of all these factors and scale from 1 to 5, and each of those factors is weighted so that you get a number at the very end that kicks out that says this person is scoring a 3.654 on a 1 to 5 scale. And
What if you're doing a good job but your supervisor doesn't like you?
well, and that's where the supervisors need to be trained too. That there's things the supervisors need to be doing on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, not just on the annual review. And so, I mean, that's some of the complicated nature of doing a merit system when you're dealing with such a broad array of responsibilities and duties. And
Okay, is there anything that we can agree on as a group as far as longevity? You have a problem with longevity the way it was set up?
I'm not a big fan of anything that's not merit-based. That's just me.
Well, that's too big for us
No,
to tackle right now.
no, I understand.
Nicole?
I do not have a problem with that.
I don't. Mr. Nolan?
I'm with you, I don't have a problem with it per se.
It would be every other year? Is that what you're looking at? In lieu of a COLA? Is that what you're doing?
No. When a person has reached
Okay.
the sixth year, they
yeah.
get the eighth year, and the 10th year. The years in between, the council's in control of the COLA.
Yeah.
So that can be decided at the time.
maybe to clarify, the way it's written right now, the longevity, if somebody's reached a longevity milestone, that would be in addition to COLA.
Right.
Right.
It's only those three.
Right, but the city council sets the COLA.
Yes,
I mean, it might be 3%, it might be 1%, it might be 0.5%.
right,
Or zero. Zero.
or zero.
But you're gonna do that how often?
The wages would be looked at every other year to make sure the averages, where the averages are.
Right, but the longevity.
The longevity would kick in only at years 6, 8, and 10.
Per employee, so it could change based on the person.
Right.
They won't all be at one time. I
No.
guess is what I'm saying.
I'm on the fence. But I wouldn't go along with it with merit. I would, if I had to choose, it would be longevity, not merit.
So I think we have consensus that we can keep the steps.
Okay.
So let's lock that in. The only thing we need to do now is decide whether we want to do valuation or population or some combination. Any, you have a preference? You want to see the data?
I want to see the data. I think it should be heavily weighted on valuation.
So, I mean, let me come back to this tool then. Even if we just took the 6 to 10,000 and we put 100% of the weight is on valuation,
Sure.
then you can decide at what point on the scale are we going to stop the valuation. And you've already said that we probably ought to pick a factor of 50% more or 20% more or less than the Caribou. So we can add cities below this and have the same tool and the weighting factor there. Your valuation, you could set that at 60% and your population at 40%. And it's going to tell you which cities are the most closely aligned to Caribou.
Okay.
And we can just say, okay, until we get our 10,
Lower.
we would start at Caribou and we'd go, can we get 5 above and 5 below? Or where on the scale are the 10 closest to Caribou? And as long as we can get 10 samples.
See where the numbers take us. So basically, you're going to add 10 or 12 or 15 towns with valuation less than Caribou.
Yeah, I could add all the cities from 5,000 to 11,000 and we'll just find where the
No, okay,
that are
whatever.
closest to.
Yeah. Whatever's easiest for you.
Okay.
I don't want to drag this out till budget time because they get shafted every time that happens. So when's our next workshop? Do we have one in May?
Next workshop won't be till July. I think it's the fifth Monday in July.
I'd like to talk about this before then. We have a meeting
14.
May 14th.
May 14th.
Oh, yeah.
No, that's in June because we need to set the mill rate, no?
You have a special meeting.
We have to set the mill rate.
So anyway, say
Want to do it on the 28th weekend?
28th, is that Memorial Day weekend or the
It is
weekend after?
Memorial Day.
It's the 28th. It's a special, and I don't know why they'll do a special.
28th?
But that is
That's Memorial Day. Is it?
So it's
Yes, it
really-
is.
It's
It is,
really
yeah.
special.
Yeah.
It's really special.
We can cancel that one.
I was gonna
So,
say I saw it on the
how about the
28th.
how about the 21st, we have a workshop?
You call the meetings, Mayor. So we can
No,
do
no,
that.
no, are you
Oh,
going to
you
be able to
can't
have
do
this,
I'm gonna be in Bangor as well.
An assessment that week. I can't-
what's going on?
I'm gonna be in Bangor on the 21st. Sorry.
What, are the Shriners coming? or what?
I have a job I have to do.
When are you coming back?
That night. Maybe later.
I'm not available that week at all.
Really?
I have assessment at work, so I'm like tied to my desk.
Okay, we meet the 15th, 14th?
14th, yeah?
When are we having the next public safety thing? Have you decided?
That's set for May 9th.
So do we want to do a workshop the same night as the meeting, or?
On the 14th, you mean?
On the
On the
9th.
14th?
Oh, on the 14th.
So the 14th, I can just tell you the things right now that we tentatively have on the agenda for the 14th. You've got your typical consent items with finances. Dave he's sent out a bid request for chip seal sand, chip seal stone, shim and patch, culverts, paint, paving 1, paving 2. Basically, a lot of public works bids that need to be approved. We've got the Chief Hagan wants to talk about a statewide jurisdiction for the officers. We have a request for extension of a liquor license on premises for North Main Brewing Company, rubbish hauler permit renewal, tentatively discussion regarding an opioid lawsuit that we could become party to. We have a CDBG application approval for the Rosginall Daycare Facility. I know she's still working to pull information together on that. And we have the ordinance pertaining to TIFs. We have a public hearing on that. Discussion regarding creation of an airport advisory committee. And introduction of an ordinance pertaining to customary licenses and permits.
No executive session?
None anticipated at this point.
I mean, let's say we plan a meeting for 6 o'clock with a workshop after.
Well, you could just make it part of the just general discussion within the meeting.
Just do what?
Just make it a discussion item in the meeting at the end of the agenda.
Oh, okay.
That's fine.
I'd rather stay longer than
That's all that extra mile and shit.
come. Yeah, it's 5 minutes.
Okay, update on public safety facilities.
So the last time the Public Safety Committee, Advisory Committee met, we were hoping that we could narrow the focus down a little bit and look at fewer options and fewer as far as land and options for build. And the consensus of the committee, I shouldn't say consensus, but the general feelings from the committee was, let's continue to look at all options for what we could build and all options for where we could build. Did I say that right? What we could build and where we could build. Okay. And so I just wanted to show you where we're at in that process. So we're looking at 6 options at this point. The first one is just we don't build anything, we just maintain existing facilities where they're at. And we're looking at the criteria of this criteria all came from the Citizens Advisory Committee. They wanted to look at these different things. For one, is this going to be a landmark element of the city? Is it going to stand out, be something which we're proud of, can draw attention to the city? And of course, different factors associated with that. Is it on a high traffic area? The architectural quality of it, the historical significance of the site. What direct impacts is the facility going to have? And that's, of course, depends on the type of facility we build and where we build it. But we're, in a general way, we're not going out and measuring noise and light and things, because a lot of these, it's going to be the same impacts no matter where it's built. But just in a general way, are things going to change or not change? We are looking at number of homes, religious facilities, schools, businesses, and parks in proximity to the different sites that we're looking at. As far as the existing facilities, meaning the existing facilities on the existing current police station, current fire station, but some of the properties that we're looking at also have existing facilities. And so do they meet ADA requirements? Are there short-term maintenance needs that we need to be mindful of, such as the MeanCon building? We're going to have to replace the heating system. We're going to have to replace the roof, and making sure we have some of those costs incorporated into the study. As far as the sites themselves, how is the access, the utilities, the topography of the property, the ownership, proximity to current fueling stops, environmental cleanup issues, response times to surrounding jurisdictions, access from proximity to the CBD. Not necessarily response time, but because of its position in the community, does it also help just because of its placement, maybe stave off certain elements being in the area? So proximity to the CBD, the central business district, the high school, middle school, elementary school. Are there some indirect impacts, such as potential uses that would be lost if we built on those properties or utilized different facilities? Are there some uses that might be facilitated that could come into a property because we also were on that same property? Would it help clean up a blighted area if we went onto a particular property? Are there strings attached to those other properties or buildings? We know that the MECON building, having looked into that, we have to pay the federal government 20% of the value of that building if we decide we're going to keep it for ourselves. So we'd have to go out, determine what the fair market value of the building is, and they would have to be compensated for that. So those are some of the strings that we need to look at with different buildings. Is there going to be tax loss depending on where we build this? Financial estimates, project costs over, for a 5-year period of time that might be involved with it. Are we going to have to pay the federal dollars back or state dollars back? Is there going to be land acquired with it? And of course, useful life of the facilities themselves. So with these different options that we're looking at, we're trying to go through each of these criteria and come up with these different factors, and looking at, as we start to fill this in, green means it's better, red means it's worse. And we're not trying to delve too much into a lot of dollar figures yet, because we're just not at that point. We're still very high level. But option 0 is just maintain the existing facilities. option 1 would be that we just renovate the police station where it is downstairs and maintain the fire station. And again, we'll fill all of these in. Option 2 is building a brand new police station somewhere, but leave the fire station where it's at and just maintain it. So I like to call that one True Blue. It's all about the police. They get a new facility, and Chief Cahagan's been advocating for that one for some reason. Option 3, a brand new police station and expand the fire facilities. So maybe adding on 2 or 3 bays to the fire station within the building itself, adding the additional facilities that are necessary, but they would stay on that site. Option 4 would be expanding the fire station by itself to accommodate the police. So we essentially create one combined facility, but it's all on that one property. And option 5 would be a brand new facility that would be combined with both police and fire. And so those are the options that we're looking at this point. The properties that they've asked us to look at include, of course, the existing site. And, you know, for option 5, the existing site wouldn't pertain to option 5 because we're talking about brand new somewhere else. But other properties we're looking at would be the Birdseye property, the Mekon building at 60 Access Highway, discussions with the hospital about is there property the hospital owns that we could be up close to the roundabout, maybe building something there. The National Guard building on York Street, the Pines Health building, they're part of the hospital's new wing that they're going to be building would accommodate Pines up there, so you have all Pines and Cary in the same facility, which would open up the Pines Health building as a possible spot. So we have that property we're looking at. There was some question of is there property available near Public Works, somewhere between the Public Works building, the rec building, or the airport, somewhere on there is there ground or room for a building. And with recent things happening around the RSU and not knowing what's for sure going to happen with the new school, that brought the Learning Center back onto the table as a potential location to build. Or if we were to add on to the Learning Center in a way, is that a piece of ground to look at? So, you're shaking your head.
I mean, to use the Learning Center and build a park at the Birdseye site, and how does that
Maybe
but anyway.
Maybe it gets built somewhere else. I don't know, but the indication from the RSU's architect is that the Learning Center is not an option for a public safety facility because of how far they are down the road with the new school. But if the new school doesn't get built, we retain Teague Park and can build a new public facility there at the Learning Center. Does that make sense? So again, it's because the new school, we don't know what's happening with that. It's just been brought back onto the table for consideration.
Hasn't been a good week, has it?
There's a lot of work, and I'm not just doing it. I know that Gary and Mike and Chief Sissy and Penny's been involved and Ken's been involved, and we're gathering information where we can. We're trying not to utilize the consultant very much yet. Once we drill down and get the top 3 properties and maybe the top 2 options for as far as facilities, then we'll get the consultant more on board with looking at dollar and figures. And we're hoping as we go through this, some of these options or subsets of options will just kind of naturally fall off the table as these aren't going to work. But May 9th, we'll have our next meeting with the Citizens Advisory Committee to go through what we've put together again at a high level to hopefully start to whittle this down.
The thing with remodeling, I was talking to my brother, and he's in construction, and he says once you remodel and you're under those new codes, says, we had a $60,000 job to do something, plus 200,000 to fix everything, like to put a new roof on something. But now we gotta put new steel and new this so that you can insulate for the extra weight, and that remodeling stuff gets expensive.
You don't know what you're
And you
gonna
still
run
have an
into.
old building.
You just don't know what you're gonna run into.
So that's the update on the public safety, unless somebody's got any questions.
Not so much question as comments, as I look at our assets of Caribou and what's their strengths and weaknesses, and when you look at the Bird's Eye facility, you just see great access to water and sewer. Because of the way it was, the infrastructure was done prior. When you look at the MECON building, you just look at the wiring and the equipment that they used to have in there that used to run all the different, what a great manufacturing building, because the wiring is right there. And these are all at which, I mean, I don't know how much a police department needs wiring. Not to the extent that that building is wired up.
Right.
So I look at weaks and strengths, and it's just too bad that couldn't get a private sector person up there on the Bird's Eye facility and use the asset of the water and sewer. It's too bad you couldn't get a private manufacturer at the MECON building because of the wiring. These are things we could give people without costing us any money.
Very nearly, right.
I bring this up, I hope they keep that in mind too, in determining buildings.
We also found out the funding that we received to help clean up the Bird's Eye site, it has a 20-year string attached to it, to where we can't sell that or encumber it in any way.
What kind of sense does that make?
And so
You can't sell
I
it?
mean, this Northern Border Commission's supposed to help,
the economic development.
yeah. So how does shutting a place down for 20 years help economic development?
Yeah, what's the intent of that? Right, that's when so what's the,
Before we spend $1 of that money, we're gonna make sure we understand
okay, sure.
that string, how tight that is. and
Yeah.
what we can do with it.
But, like, my question, like, what is the intent of that? That they give you a bunch of money to clean up a site, but then you can't, do they want it as, open green space, or, I mean, what's the intent?
The intent is supposed to benefit the economics of the areas to which they're distributing funds. And so it's hard to say if we clean this up, but we can't do anything with it, it's counterintuitive.
Sure.
And so we'll have to look at the,
I misunderstood, which isn't out of the ordinary. We can't sell that site.
if we use that $100,000 grant to clean it up, we have to basically retain it for 20 years.
What can we do with it?
Look at it, it should be pretty.
Could you put the police station on it? Because it's something.
We could use it for our benefit.
Right, okay.
There you go.
Yes.
Yes.
There you go.
We could,
We could do that.
right.
So, I actually printed off your, can you pull that up on here?
Yep.
So that's why you threw this out, just as an idea. If we took the money, cleaned up the site, we could retain it and use it for a purpose similar to this. Is that
Right.
your,
Right.
One of them identities that we don't have any responsibility.
So I emailed this out. This was just one, again, real rough concept of if we can't do anything with this property and we have to use it for our own beneficial use for 20 years, what could we do to,
what was that on the north end of the property? Is that like,
well, and this, we'd have to be really careful how we set this up. I know there's some discussion, this could be the corner for the new public safety facility
Sure.
and occupy that ground with that.
But what are you showing there right now?
What it's showing right now is but a fast food and a couple of, maybe small office buildings or retail buildings that are right there on that corner and sharing the parking lot for the park. But,
So just like small commercial suites, like.
right. Those are, that would be an Arby's, McDonald's, your typical fast food building. These, you could put 3 different tenants into each of these buildings.
Oh, okay.
Now, the $100,000 from them would only clean up a portion of it anyway.
Right.
So if you only use it for a portion of it, can you sell
Sell
off
the other
and use the
portion? Can you
rest?
subdivide?
That's what we'd have to look at, because we've already cleaned up
Right,
a
that's what I
portion of the
thought you did,
property.
yes, yeah. I thought part of it was cleaned up, where
Yeah,
you were looking to put the safety building if you do. A portion of that is already cleaned up, right?
right.
Okay, so if you use just their money for a portion of it, and then next year, maybe if we get the brownfield grant or something.
We'd have to look at the wording and how that plays out, because typically with any federal dollars, even if you only use 1% federal dollars for an entire project, it in a sense dirties the whole project.
See, that doesn't even go very far to clean up. I think you probably just want to.
Say thank you, send it
Thank
to
you, but no thank
the
you.
next border.
Yeah.
We'll look at those, again, we'll look at that funding and we'll make some phone calls to see how tight is that, or what really is the intent of that, and how can we continue to use the property.
Is that money from the state or federal?
Federal.
It's called the Northern Border Commission, supposed to help from New England over to New York State, all that big chunk of land with
the
not much
nice-
happening.
Yeah, the nice thing about the dollars is that usually when you get federal dollars, you can't go to this federal agency and get money there, and then go to this agency and get money there, and go to this agency and get money there, and say, well, we're gonna, if the city has to match 20% of the total project, well, hey, that's about 20% that we got from that federal agency, so we're gonna say that's the city's 20%. You can't do that typically as you get federal dollars. But with this Northern Border money, you can use that as match toward other federal dollars. That's one of the benefits of having that money, is there's less that we would have to put into match, because we could match it with those dollars.
So we need to find out what the rationale behind that 20-year deal and see if we can get an exemption.
Right.
I misspoke. What monies did we receive that does not allow us to sell this?
The Northern Border,
That's the money.
But we haven't used it.
Yeah, but I'm
Right.
going to what it doesn't make rationale.
No.
Now, if you use
come
that
full
money
circle.
as matching funds for
I'm
something
trying to
else,
get caught up.
does that stipulation still apply?
So they're gonna look into it, get back to us.
we'll look into it. Yeah. There's always strings attached to federal dollars, some more, some less, and like I said, before we spend any of those dollars, we'll make sure what we have to deal with.
So the next meeting of the Safety Citizens Advisory Committee is a week from Wednesday, the 9th,
29th,
6 o'clock at the
EOC building.
EOC building, Lions building.
Yes.
And any other business from any?
Yes.
Yes.
You're not meeting on May 28th for a
Right.
special meeting. I will need a counter, and it sounded like it was hard for you guys to get together. You're gonna do it on the 14th.
Yep.
But until RSU has their meeting on the 16th, I won't have their notice of election to be countersigned, and I need that countersigned before we meet again officially on the 11th of June. So I'm throwing that out there, that maybe it could be put on the agenda for the 14th, that they, to approve it and come in to sign it when it becomes available, because it does need to be countersigned so I can get that posted. Am I making sense?
We come at our own time after the 16th to see you and sign the document.
Call us and we'll come in.
Right. I'll give you a window of when to be here. And, come in before that date.
I don't think so. They can't.
So what would be the wording on that, Gene?
I'll get you the,
Okay.
I'll get it, but it should be added maybe to the consent agenda or something. to the
Any
next
other items?
Should we talk about school and or the River Road?
If you'd like to, we can do that. So as far as the school is concerned, Gary, you might have the latest information on that.
What I was told last week was we will have a definite answer come this Wednesday of what's gonna happen, whether we wanna reutilize our park for the season. Wednesday, the superintendent of schools told me that he will have an answer for us if we can use the park for the summer.
So best scenario is this is going to delay the project a year?
Potentially. They've got, I think they're down to 10 days now, I believe, that they've got time to negotiate with Bowman, the general contractor, the only contractor that put the bid in. So they gotta negotiate with them whether they can find the $10 extra million to reduce.
The state was not going to kick in an extra dime?
Not at this moment. They asked them to negotiate with Bowman. So any different changes that come about this now has to be approved by the Board of Education. And we all know how quickly they move along. And any changes that we throw, any other changes to the park, potentially at Learning Center, don't forget National Park Service has got their hands in that. So they would have to reconvey a piece of property to their liking, Yellow Book appraisal it, all that stuff. So that's, we all know that that's an 8 to 12 month process to begin with, right there. So hopefully Wednesday we will have some more information, and the minute I get the information or Dennis gets the information, we'll make sure that you guys get it. But at this moment right now, it looks like it's on the back burner at the moment.
Does that affect the Hilltop School and what's happening with Soderbergh?
Affects everything.
It wouldn't, because that's officially closed, right? Okay. Okay, so that'll, there were 2 or 3 other bids, but they backed out?
There was 3 general contractors that were all for bid.
But they never bid at
Those
all?
other 2 did not bid.
Okay.
They chose not to bid.
Because they couldn't do it for the amount that?
They just chose not to bid.
Oh,
Business,
okay.
business must be good.
Business
Yeah, they wanna
is,
tie up that amount.
according to Bowman, there's so much work in the state of Maine the next couple of years. It's incredible how much work is going on in the rest of the state.
Okay, River Road.
River Road.
You have pictures?
Here we
Dave,
go.
do you want to go on that?
We have 9.
Ask,
I was there yesterday, but yeah, that's a lot of pictures.
Not good.
I guess at this point, so the council's aware, we've barricaded the road, and it's anywhere from 1,800 feet to a half mile along the river road, depending on which unit of measurement we want to use.
yeah.
Using the computer, it's about a half mile. Using Ron's foot, it's about 1,800 feet. So, but as you travel north along the river road, you get out of this initial cluster of houses, and it starts to make a bend, and that's about where the barricade sits. And from there, it goes up all the way to, there's 4 more houses on the right side of the road, and it starts to drop back down the hill, and that's where the other set of barricades is. And so all the way along there, even back, the worst part is in front of the 4 homes. Dave and I were out there this morning, and the left side or the west side of the shoulder had dropped 2 feet
From yesterday?
from from when we were out Sunday afternoon looking at it. And off of the shoulder, there's places now where the cracks have opened up on the hill itself. And there's several places along the road, along that whole stretch, where you can see new cracks forming in the asphalt as it's pulling away. Right now, it appears most of the length of the road, it's primarily on the west side, the west half of the road, as we go along there. The problem is just beyond the barricade, this stretch of the road, it maybe extends away off the asphalt surface 10, 15 feet, and then it just drops off for 30 to 70 feet down to close to the river elevation. And so there's really nothing holding that side of the road. We're not sure why it chose this year of any to start doing this, but it just appears that the ground is overly saturated, and the flooding itself doesn't appear to be eroding into the banks, but because of how the thaws occurred or the frost came out and the rains that have been here, the ground is just chock full of moisture, and the road is starting to fail. The worst part, as I said, is in front of these 4 homes. The second home is almost in this photo. You see where that white line is that the computer's drawing? That's about the extent of the sloughing as of this morning.
This afternoon, I guess it got worse.
Okay.
Because my sister called me about 4:30 and she said it was just toppling over. She was being gobbled right up.
We have cones out there right now that are set off about 4 feet from the edge of the slough. It's causing, if someone's driving their car, right now only these 4 homeowners should be driving their cars in the area, but that one stretch, they would have to have a wheel on the grass to get past and avoid the cones that we've set out. We expect there's really nothing that we can do at this point other than protect those homeowners and be mindful of the traffic pattern as best we can. It may be that a couple of these homes may lose access to their driveways because of this, and so we try. I know that Officer Kevin St. Peter, I was going to say Pelletier, but Officer St. Peter's been in those homes talking with those individuals quite a bit. It may come that we may have to bring maybe some material in to help them get to their driveways, depending on how much occurs there. And we'll just watch it, we'll monitor it, but with the next 5 days showing rain in the forecast and low temperatures, it's just going to continue to get in there, especially with the cracks widening. The moisture is going to get in there even more. And so we expect that it's going to get worse. And so we'll do what we can to protect those residents as best we can. But until things really start to dry out, we're not going to be able to get on to it and begin investigating what needs to be done to fix it.
Both MEMA and the governor's office is aware of the situation here, so. My understanding that maybe the MEMA director is gonna fly up tomorrow and take a personal look at it.
On his way to Fort Kent?
It's just a sheet.
It's a sheet?
So right now, I know there's been some concern that people that are traveling westbound on the road, they get all the way to the barricades and have to turn around and go back all the other way, but the safest option really is for them not to be driving on that stretch of road.
But do you have a sign at the Fort Road that it's closed?
We did, so not only at the barricades do we have it, but that gets you in a long ways. So we made up some signs this morning, we installed them this afternoon, it says, road closed, through traffic. And we have them at both intersections of the Fort Road. 24 by 30, so. And they are a permanent install until, because this is gonna be a long time fix. This won't be fixed this summer.
Years, maybe a year or 2
I
years.
mean, could be a long while, just, even if we can get FEMA money, it'll be in engineering for, it could be 6 months to a year just for engineering. We went through something similar to this back in 2008 when the Fort Kent flood had on our Grimes Road, Grimes Mill Road. The area that was affected was probably 1/5 or less than this. And not that it has anything to do with it, but there they had plenty of room to move the road over. They had to purchase a little bit of land from 2 of the owners. They moved 1 utility pole, and they called it armored the lower portion of the embankment, and that was a $750,000 job. And that's just a small area compared to what this is. So this will be a very large fix if the road goes back. Yeah, it's a disaster. It's a disaster. I do worry about at least 2 of the houses. Dennis had mentioned that maybe we could do something on their lawn to make it part of the roadway for them to get out. I can tell you that there's no way we can bring a loader truck in there with gravel on it. I don't dare do it. I pass with my pickup and I hold my breath because you just don't know when it's gonna slip. It didn't look bad when there was only a 4-inch, 5-inch gap. The morning that we were out there might have been, at the highest point, there was 8 inches in separation, but the gap was only 5 inches. Now I can tell you, even this afternoon when you were out there, Mark, there's places that are over 2 feet where it slipped. And that was at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. I bet in the morning we're gonna find chunks of it have actually gone right down. I did verify that the sewer line is on the residential side. We found a couple of covers, manhole covers for the sewer line. But just because you look at it, if you're looking to the north, and it looks like only 1/2 the road let go, that doesn't mean that once that moves, the other half doesn't slide with it.
Yeah.
And when that happens, there'll be no access to them doyards, and people will have to relocate, I'm afraid. We can't plow the road, the mail can't get up through there. There's just-
Ambulance can't, fire trucks?
Fire trucks, ambulances can't get through there. The bus picks up, I think it's Scott's house.
Yeah,
So the bus can't get through the barricades that I have there.
you gotta go over.
If I move the barricades further up, all the traffic will be turning in their dooryard. How would you like to have headlights turning all night long in your dooryard, shining lights, you know? So I tried to put the barricades in an area that was the least effective, but still had room to turn. Typical road doesn't give you enough room. And we're already to the point, especially with the saturation of today, that I know we cannot take a loader truck in there to go put some gravel to take that guy's lawn and make it into a road for him to get out. So we're gonna have to watch that real close. And if it would happen to dry out and the easterly side doesn't move, I still wouldn't let traffic through there, but I'd be uncomfortable letting that gentleman that lives right there, there's at least 2 of them that I have real big concerns for. As long as that doesn't slide, he might be okay, but
Who, Chief, do you have the authority to tell them it's not safe and you should move?
No, we don't.
No?
It'd be like the wildfires out west. You can advise, but we can't mandate.
I mean, it'd be too bad, because, I mean, it drops 75 feet, and it's only 50 feet wide to the house. I mean, Could happen.
Oh, that part, where it's separated 2 feet, that's going down. That's going down, there's no question in my mind.
I think
In
she
seeing
said-
how much it moved 2 feet in 24 hours. You know,
Is the guardrail going out or is it just going down?
guardrail's going down.
Just straight down,
At no point did the guardrail do this. It's not like the land is pushing that way, it just
sinking.
sliding down. And the guardrails are down there 3 feet, 4 feet into the ground. So the slide is lower than that because the guardrails stay parallel as it goes down. The trees is probably the only thing that's holding it there, the root
That
system.
bank.
And it keeps going.
So we hope it doesn't get any closer to the houses, but we'll watch that. Like I said, this week of rain and cool weather isn't going to help the situation, but we'll watch it. We've already had Jan Murchison from Sewell Engineering come out. She just walked it with us today. We're putting together information. The county is trying to put together information for a federal emergency application. And so we just asked them, can you give us a real ballpark number? And of course, she says, this is beyond ballpark as far as potential costs. And so when the time comes to actually fix the road, I anticipate we'll put an RFP out that will include engineering services, geotechnical services, for design. There's going to be survey work involved, obviously coordination with the utility companies, property owners. It's going to be a big project. So,
Every step of the way, the department heads would, anyone walk through this dooryard, if called Caribou, are there any emergency funds that could help temporarily move some of those people?
Red Cross, I imagine.
yeah, we could talk to
At
the
least
Red
offer it
Cross.
to them. It's up to them if they wanna move, like the chief says. But I would hate to think it's because someone doesn't have
The information.
the money or
Sure.
at least offer it to them.
Yeah.
If it's out there, because, yeah, some of those houses are way too close. So,
I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. I couldn't stay there.
The way it is we can see where the slide is. And it's easy to say the houses look like they're gonna be okay. But once that slide is gone and the second portion goes, if it goes, we can't predict that. There's no way. An engineer may be able to once they do bore samples or look at that stuff, but none of that's been done yet, so. I'm afraid that by the time that we could get someone here, the problem will have already happened. If it's gonna slide, it'll slide in this rain season.
is there anybody within the Department of Transportation that has some kind of knowledge of this kind of deal that could come up also? I mean, you mentioned a couple agencies that were coming up. They're coming up in the relationship of money or,
That'd be the money.
well, is there anybody
So
that you?
MEMA is the division, or MEMA is the state of FEMA. So we have to go through MEMA to get to FEMA, and then to declare that we meet the threshold of how much disaster there is.
So that's the monetary side of it, but there's also, and for lack of a better term, the knowledge side of looking at what we got here. Is there any chance that those houses could go?
So I think that's part of the reason why we had an engineering firm come look today.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know, she may not have been able to give us the answer, but she knows who to contact that can help us with that.
Yeah.
And that's the side that we were on today.
Okay.
So, yes,
Yeah, okay.
someone is gonna help us. There's no question about it, so.
Well,
It's gonna go.
if it's gonna, if it's
Gotta
gonna,
I don't need to laugh, because it's tragic out there
yeah.
for those people that live out there, but you, I mean, it's
It's,
sliding, and,
It hasn't stopped
and when
moving.
you say, just from what I looked at, you said the trees are holding it together. I think the trees are moving too.
oh, of course they are.
I mean,
Yeah.
the trees say, oh, they're all standing there. Well, no, they're 2 feet
Further down.
further down.
That's right. There's,
And all of their roots are moving, just like those guardrail posts are moving.
Can you pull up the GIS?
but if it's a
tax
$2
map?
or $3 million fix, in my mind, that's a disaster
yeah,
for a town this size.
I was told today that the threshold is $1.9 million.
So these are the 4 homes that are,
So, yeah, so click on the riverbank, right there, yeah. Yeah. So she's gonna lose a portion of her 3 acres.
well, I don't know that she'll lose it. She'll probably gain a lot of material on her 3 acres.
Can we give her the bill for fixing the problem?
Yeah, again, it's not necessarily an erosion problem with, it's not that the ground is being carved out by the river. It's whatever's happened to the east, the moisture has come into the ground and it's permeated that such that
Yeah, it's that.
just
front one,
the
there's no support.
unstabilized slope on the other side is just giving way. So,
See the turns in the field when they were cutting or whatever they were doing?
Yeah.
Is it further west, maybe, spreading line?
yeah, the road itself is, from what we could see, you maybe had 2 inches of asphalt on top of some material, might have been multiple chip seals over time, or maybe there was some road base mixed in there at some point, but maybe only about 6 inches, and everything below that was native material. So there's,
It's clay.
as soon as water gets into it,
Horse and buggy,
it's,
horses went down.
so.
Okay, keep us posted, hope for the best. Anything else?
Need a motion to adjourn, or we don't?
Motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have?
Second?
No, I don't think we have to.
Don't have to? It was on the agenda.
Thank you.
I support adjournment.
Thank you.